I got to talk a little bit about this Raptors trade because I took a pretty hardline position that I do not like it, and I've slept on it, and I still don't like it. And I want to start by saying this. I didn't like when Masai traded Norm Powell for Gary Trent, and I got a lot of blowback on that. I didn't like when the Raptors sat on Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet at a deadline when the vast majority of the NBA world thought that it was going to be a deadline where the Raptors were sellers given the nature of the contracts of their players. They ended up waiting, and they sold Siakam for what was pretty well considered cents on the dollar. Again, you can look at this afterwards and piece together and show me, hey, it's now Jacoby Walter, and you got Brandon Ingram, and you've got, Ochai Agbaji. Okay, great. At the time, we'll see how that all plays out. But at the time, from just a value standpoint, the Siakam trade was not good. It was viewed, again, by just about everybody, this isn't just me, as pretty low return for a NBA All-Star who was in his prime. So they kind of mishandled that. They also have traded OG Anunoby for two players who, one of which has had a very good season with the Raptors, again, albeit on a team that's bottom 5 in the NBA, and a player who has been hurt, but got $35 million contract to be the team's starting point guard. And now, with this recent move, I think that it's fair to at least guess that neither guy is 100% going to be a part of this core in, a year from now? 2 years from now? I'm not really sure. Neither guy was listed as an untouchable in Michael Grange's piece about what the Raptors were willing to do. The Raptors also traded a first-round pick for pending free agent Jakob Poeltl for the right to pay him $20 million in a draft that had Victor Wembanyama, who has already become the NBA's most untouchable player. And now this. So when people hit me with, hey, believe in Masai, I don't think that track record since the championship has been there to the degree in which I'm just going to give complete faith over to this general manager or president, this front office in general, the way that I did coming out of the 2019 season where they won a championship. After a run where Masai Ujiri had made a lot of really shrewd and intelligent moves. I just don't view the front office the same way. You get a grace period when it comes to a championship window. I don't think that these guys are incompetent. I don't think that they're a bottom 5 front office in the NBA. I'm just trying to illustrate that the trade deadline has not been a source of strength for the Raptors over the last 5 seasons. Now, the trade. The Raptors trade to me is not about the 2026 Pacers first, okay? Was I a little surprised to see it in it? Considering, again, Brandon Ingram is a pending free agent? Absolutely I was. And I will say that even though I'm not overly concerned about the 2026 first, that this front office has now twice dealt first-rounders when they've been bottom 10 in the league with a roster full of question marks. And it's hard to see competent front offices doing similar moves. Is this something that you think Danny Ainge would have done? Is this something that you think Sam Presti would have done? These are teams that continue to accumulate assets when they are in a rebuild. No, this is about you committing to a vision and then deviating from it after a little over half of a season in a rebuild where your team is, again, bottom 5 in the NBA. Have there been some real steps for Scotty Barnes this year? Yeah, I do. I think so. Has RJ Barrett had a really good year? Has this team looked better than their record suggests when they've been able to be fully healthy? Of course. But when you're bottom 5 in the NBA, I'm reluctant to believe that they've shown you something that would cause you to deviate from a path. And that's the real question mark here is what exactly is the vision for this Toronto Raptors team? And are they ever able to really endure a rebuild? Because if memory serves correct, the Raptors were trying to re-sign Fred VanVleet. They were reluctant to trade Pascal Siakam because they did want to keep him as a long-term part of the future. This was a front office that looked at that core of players around Scotty Barnes and thought at different junctures, hey, why don't we keep this together? And it essentially needed to have their hand forced in order to move off of those players. So to me, it's about the path that the Toronto Raptors have taken, which is expediting a rebuild that fans, I mostly believe, were essentially signing up for and okay with. And it brings me to this, which is the Raptors both operate like a small market team and a big market team. the small market team in the sense of they make desperate moves like that type of a market where they treat draft picks like they're capable of building without them. And I understand they got Kawhi Leonard, even though that was using a draft pick. But they will send these picks out the door and act as though they don't need them the way that a small market team does. But then they act like that desperation mixed with they're just thought that no one's going to come here unless they trade for them and buy low is very strange for a team that over its tenure has not proven its ability to sign free agents and, flat out acts that way. Acts that way as though that's the only path to get guys here. So this team was in year one of a rebuild. Masai asked for patience from people, and then he decided to move in on a player who has missed 30 games in his career 3 times, has never hit 65 games played since his rookie season, actually. He plays in under 70% of the games a year. He has a need for a new contract, and it's a questionable basketball fit, even if he is talented, which I think he is. I love this guy's scoring package, okay? It's aesthetically pleasing. I've always liked to watch Brandon Ingram shoot it. He's a different kind of player, but you know what he needs? He needs the basketball in his hands. You know what he doesn't do particularly well? Play off the ball. You know what else he doesn't do particularly well? Is play defense. You know where he does like to score the vast majority of his baskets? In the mid-range. He's a good shooter. He's a very good shooter. He's like a career 37% guy from 3. You know where he doesn't really score? At the rim. Less than 25% of his shots come at the rim, which when we do the 3-level scorer thing, it's like, can he do it there? Sure. It's not really where he's overly efficient, so he's a mid-range scorer. Does that sound familiar? Not the paint stuff, but yeah, Scotty Barnes. He needs the ball in his hand. He likes to operate in the mid-range. RJ Barrett likes to operate in the mid-range. Likes to have the ball in his hands. Quickly wants to have the ball in his hands. More of an above the break 3 shooter. But you're kind of getting the point here is I'm not really sure how these pieces all fit together. And so, you got a guy who can score, but I don't really see how he fits your team. And I've got to ask you, just as a fan, to evaluate this and look at it from this perspective, do you think that an OG Siakam Scotty as a core 3 is discernibly worse than Ingram, IQ, and Barnes? Because I don't. I don't really believe that is somehow all of a sudden going to be a championship contending team over the next couple of seasons. Now, things really change if they do hit on this draft pick, right? If they hit first overall, they draft Cooper Flagg, it changes the direction of the franchise greatly. But you've put a lot of eggs into this basket. And again, it's about the flexibility that your franchise has moving forward. Now you've got a player who's going to command a big dollar amount. Yes, you've traded for him. Yes, you've inherited his bird rights. But you're likely going to have to go into the tax or move out a piece like an RJ Barrett, who has been a culture setter for you and somebody who has had a very, very good season and, frankly, stays healthier than Brandon Ingram has in his career. So you brought in a guy with 2 playoff wins who doesn't play all that much, who doesn't really fit, and who you're likely going to have to overpay. And I don't want to hear about the bargain deal that they're going to get because they haven't established that they can do that. They paid Jakob Poeltl more than the market thought he was going to get. They paid Emmanuel Quickly far more than the market thought he was going to get. And so when I look at this trade, I don't care as much about the picks. I care about the fit, and I care about the vision. Anyways, Ben Ennis is here. I made him sit through all of that. That was pretty long.
Yeah, I don't know. I expected it to be about that length. I very much enjoyed it. A couple things I wanted to pick up on there.
Sure.
One is about deviating from the plan.
Yeah, this is where I wanted to start with you too. So I'm glad you went
so
there.
what was the plan in your eyes? Was it a multi-year bottoming out?
I don't think it was bottoming out and I talked about this already, where when the Raptors are healthy, I don't think that they're a bottoming out team.
No.
They've got Scotty Barnes already further down the line.
His extension kicks in next year. Everybody's already getting paid.
But this to me is kind of where I look at it. I want to see what that draft pick is before I'm deciding on a move like this one. And I talked to Bobby Marks about it yesterday. He mentioned the possibility of a sign and trade for Ingram, and that was actually the only real possibility that he outlined in an Ingram trade. And the reason that he did that is because he's a former general manager who looks at the cap sheet and says, wait, are you going to go into the luxury tax for this team? I just don't understand the impetus to be a tax team when you're not really there. And again, as much as Brandon Ingram is talented, he made the All-Star team 5 years ago. Okay, so speaking about him,
once.
Yeah, he did it once 5 years ago. And so when we're throwing around like All-Star, I'm like, okay,
facts.
Yes, it is a fact, but this isn't someone who's just like freshly coming off of an All-Star season. I do think that they bought low in terms of his talent. If you just look at comparable deals around the NBA, other than the Luka Doncic trade, which is like free, you can have him for free.
Yeah.
But for me, the Raptors, they should operate more like a small market team in the sense of build through the draft, accumulate your assets, and really be precise with the moves that you make. And to me, Brandon Ingram, who needs a contract, and might not fit what you want to do with this basketball team, it's hard for me to see it. And so what I like to see from a general manager and from a front office in general is that you do have a vision. And so when you say, be patient, this is going to be a rebuild, we want to build around this young core, getting a volume shooter who needs the ball, who is older than Scotty Barnes and only a couple of years younger than Siakam, it's a bit of an oddity to me. And so,
Same age as OG Anunoby.
Exactly.
But OG's making $40 million starting next year as well.
And guess what Brandon Ingram's going to ask for?
Yeah, $40 million. Obviously, that's what he's going to make. Yeah, no, you would say that he's a good player, right? And
Brandon Ingram? Yeah, he's a good player.
And Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk are
That's nothing. That's just those are
nothing.
salary pieces that are gone.
Right.
Again, this isn't about the price of acquisition. It's about the direction that the organization has decided to take, which is what? It's kind of be in the middle. I just don't look at this team and say, oh, next year they're going to be more than potentially a 5 or a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. Maybe they outpunch that, but they're not title contenders.
Oh, no, and that has to be the goal, like at least a 5 or a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference next year. Yeah, it does feel like, I mean, we talked about Mark Shapiro, Ross Atkins, how desperate they are, right? Like every insider is like, they're so desperate. You should smell how desperate they are. You can smell it on them. This Masai Ujiri is headed into the last year of his deal as well. Yeah, I don't think it was ever, the idea was to, again, be in the lottery next year. Like pretty clearly when this core is already expensive, Scotty Barnes extension kicks in next year. Emmanuel Quickley is already paid. RJ Barrett came in with a contract, right? And Jakob Poeltl he's the only center you got, and he's already getting paid, and in his late 20s as well. But yeah, with this move, you're clearly indicating to us that this is a team not ready to like take incremental steps next season, but is ready to be in a playoff series in the first round where they're potentially favored to win it. Like that's it. You took the 1 year step back, and now next season you're very much in a win now mode as far as this team can be. Obviously, win now you connotate with a championship win now, not that. But yeah, the time for accumulating assets through the draft is over. This was a 1 year plan.
So the other part of this too, which is a little unclear to me, is what the timeline is going to be for Ingram's return. He has an ankle injury.
He's not even doing anything.
Yeah, so I don't think that he's going to be around in the very near future. But again, this is a team that should be doing basically whatever they can at this point to lose the basketball games.
Well, so he fits that timeline.
Well, kind of, except for when he comes back. Don't you want to at least see a little bit of it before you tender him 40 mil?
Would I like to see like Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes play together like ever? Sure. Like that sounds great, man. And yeah, I guess they're healthy now and Quickley still on a minutes restriction. And boy, those 3 Wizards games that are still coming up in this season loom large over this team. I do think is like Jakob Poeltl is so integral to what they've done recently with all the victories. Like if that hit pointer continues to be an issue, that really helps with the tank. And I think you can massage it to a degree where, you can see proof of concept. I don't think Ingram feels necessarily an impetus that he needs to prove that he is good to like get the contract because, the Raptors are in the Seahawks, Jamal Adams, the Raptors, Emmanuel Quickley spot where it's like, you got to pay him.
With the sign and trade stuff too is unless he tells you that he doesn't want to be here flat out.
Yeah.
I don't think that you're giving up that Pacers first if the goal is to flip him at some point for more value. Like I've seen some people suggest that
there had to be some back channel discussions.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure there were, right? I'm sure there were. But I'm just saying that if you're trying to view this as, well, hey, they picked up an asset where maybe they're going to be able to get more value, I'm sorry. I don't think that you're going to be able to get something better than the Pacers 2026 first-round pick if you have to flip Brandon Ingram.
What are the protections on that?
Top 4.
Okay. Yeah, it could still be pretty good.
Yeah, it could be. The Pacers, listen, they're not amazing.
No, they're not.
They're okay. I think they're 8 games above 500 in a very watered-down Eastern Conference.
In-season tournament finalists last year, okay?
Yeah, they were. They went on one hell of a run. And that, again, expedited their rebuild.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I guess there's a scenario in which, the Raptors are good but not great, and Ingram is good and healthy-ish. And
I don't doubt that they're going to be good. That's that's not the issue to me here. The issue to me is, you know what it's like to be good if you're a Raptors fan. You know what it's like to be in the middle. That's where this organization has lived for a lot of the tenure of Masai Ujiri.
Yeah.
That's where they were trending when it came to the Siakam OG stuff. And that's kind of the major issue I have here is being reminded that these guys did look to keep that core together. They tried to keep Fred VanVleet in Toronto. They were reluctant to trade Pascal Siakam. They were reluctant to trade OG Anunoby. And I look at that team and I say to myself, yeah, it's an older group if you would have had those guys together. But
only slightly. Like Pascal's 30, OG's 27.
But that's what I mean. I'd rather have Pascal Siakam than Brandon Ingram. And it's not even like a hard decision for me.
No.
It's an easy decision for me.
Would you rather have Fred at $40 million? I mean, Fred is such a culture setter in Houston.
And yeah, by the way, if someone's screaming at the show right now saying, but would you rather have Ingram and Jacoby Walter and Ochai Agbaji or Siakam? And I would still rather have Pascal Siakam, okay? I think that I'm trying to make this very, very clear. It just doesn't make sense with what they did. It's such a hard deviation from something that they outlined from the very beginning of the season. And I just don't view Brandon Ingram for this trade package as such a once in a lifetime deal that you have to do it. I think that Masai is a little addicted to trying to buy low on guys. That's pretty clear that he's done this in the past. But yeah, man, again, look at the deadline track record. It's Jakob Poeltl for a first for the rights to pay him for $20 million. It's trading Norm Powell, who has gone on to be an NBA All-Star caliber player for a couple of lifeless seasons from Gary Trent Jr., where he did pretty much nothing for you. It's not getting a full return for Pascal Siakam, and now it's this. So what do you think the more likely outcome is here?
Yeah, okay. So that's where I follow you if you're talking about the previous moves and rehashing the decision to blow it up, which at the time felt like, well, yeah, you can't keep doing this, but and then how do you reset the timeline, because you already have Scotty Barnes here, and every year he does get older, and God, landing Cooper Flagg in the draft, I mean, it does so much.
It changes everything.
Yeah, because then you have to reset. 27 is too old.
Yeah.
That's too old for this core. It's Scotty Barnes is going to be 27 when Cooper Flagg is ready to be the best player on this team.
Well, no, I do think that Flagg, the way that he plays, it's going to fit the NBA a little bit more quickly. But you're right. He's not going to be the best player on a championship team until he's 25, 26 years old at bare minimum. Look how long it took Jason Tatum to get where he is now.
Yeah. Yes. So I agree with you when you're talking about, hey, maybe you miscalculated trading OG and Pascal for the return that you got, considering their ages, and now you're bringing in the same dudes. But yeah, if we just look at this move in a vacuum, you gave up non-good players. No offense, Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, but not core foundational pieces for a guy that can be that. Now you have to pay him, and you gave up the first round pick, which is not nothing. But yeah, you're just accumulating more good players, and whether they all fit together or not, I don't hate this move on its face.
But again, I don't care about really the value. The value is obvious. If Brandon Ingram was under contract for a couple of seasons and your team was not bottom 5 in the NBA with a bunch of young players, I would look at it and say that's a pretty good deal for this guy. I think that a lot of people are getting confused by what you're outlining here, which is the price of acquisition for a player that can score this way is not generally a couple of expirings and a first round pick. But also, it should tell you that was the market for him. That the only team that you were bidding against was the Atlanta Hawks. And I know he's injured, but let's just play this out. The Oklahoma City Thunder have 1 million draft picks. 1 million.
Yeah.
So if he's hurt right now, you still would think that he's going to be able to be back for the playoffs. He's been out for a long time right now with this ankle injury.
Early December.
Yes. You would think that he'd be able to come back, and they would say, well, why wouldn't we do this for 2026 first and a couple of expirings? I actually don't think they had the contracts to make it work. But I'm just saying that this wasn't the envy of the NBA. There weren't a lot of teams that wanted Brandon Ingram. Guess what? when Brandon Ingram was available. This past offseason, he was available. The rest of the league knew that they could acquire him, and the Raptors did it at the deadline, seemingly under duress, and all of a sudden bidding against another team where they had to throw in the first-round pick.
Well,
I just...
Yeah, I mean, that's where I follow you as well, where it's like, okay, so is this the culmination of a plan to acquire this player specifically, or is like, oh, he's available? Like, he is a guy.
He was already available.
Yeah, he is the guy. It's like, okay, well, this is the best we can do. And I like at a certain point, you don't want good to be the enemy of great here, but yeah, this is it. It's like, yeah, maybe Brandon Ingram because he's there and he's a guy that we can sign. We think for a number that won't kill us. And the luxury tax stuff it's a different deal, and that's Bobby Marks' area of expertise.
No, but it is an area this is the easy way to understand if you're a Raptors fan, if you're in that luxury tax, which they are going to project to be without other moves. I really think that the domino here is going to be that if you're really in the Brandon Ingram business, you're probably going to have to be out on the RJ Barrett business. When you're talking about accumulating good players and having them all together, I just don't really see how this is going to work where you have three guys who need the ball and all score in the mid-range and are all playmakers, but none of them like overly plus outside of Barnes for his position and size.
And does that make sense? Because Brandon Ingram's a better player than RJ Barrett, but like he's going to be making $10 million more.
More than that.
Yeah, because RJ's deal is for just slightly under 30. Yeah, and the cost of acquisition, like if you're talking... That was the original framework I was working under before the trade yesterday. That would probably, to make the contract work, be RJ headed the other way, which made little sense to me because while Ingram might be an upgrade, like he's a bigger question mark as far as the health, and he's going to cost more. Plus,
he's older.
Yeah. So that one doesn't exactly square for me. Unless you're turning RJ into something. He's no longer a toxic asset, obviously, like having a career year. Like you're recouping
I'm not really
something
sure
there.
what you're getting for RJ Barrett. Like, I'm not sure what the trade would be for him, and maybe they don't. Maybe they, and I don't think they will.
He's making a pittance now, though.
I don't think that they will. He is making a paltry, $20-some million a year. I look at the fit with this team, and it's like, I don't see where this unlocks a championship contending team unless you think that Quickly is going to be an all-star and Ingram is going to be an all-star and Barnes is going to be an all-star.
But isn't that moving the goalposts a little bit? Like, is this, okay, as currently constituted, unless you hit in the draft, or unless Scotty Barnes becomes the best player on a championship team.
If you hit Cooper Flag in the draft, it looks like a genius move no matter what because your organization now has two unquestionable pillars.
But was the goal ever to be like a team that looked like a championship contender out of the gate, or was it to be what they were in the DeRozan-Lowry era, right?
No, it was supposed to be patience.
Yeah.
That you rebuild, that you see young players grow and develop like many have this season with the opportunity to play. It's accumulating assets like picks, like cap space, and then once your team starts to show signs that they are ready to compete, which this group has not, that is an important piece of this. Did the Raptors rip off a bunch of wins just recently? Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah.
Are they better than the record
Kawhi
suggests?
and James Harden, okay?
Are they better than the record suggests?
And the Celtics.
Unquestionably. But have they shown to you an indication that this team is in some way close to winning? No. They're bottom 5 in the NBA.
Yeah.
It's just not what you see from traditional rebuilds. Again, I don't mind the price of acquisition in terms of the actual assets you gave up, even though, to me, a first-round pick in 2026 could end up having more value than you think. And most teams that are in rebuilds are patient with those picks and don't just fire them away willy-nilly. That's usually the kind of move that markets that have, older NBA stars that do those kinds of moves. That's what the Lakers do when you get Luka Doncic. That's what the Phoenix Suns did when they were trying to acquire all of these star players in Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal.
Pirtle's 29, though.
Yeah, he's going to be 30 this year. He's going to be 30 this year. And anyway, I don't love it. We'll see how, I guess, like, that's always the thing is, like, we'll see. I want to see the Raptors be successful. I think this makes them more interesting as a watch.
Yeah.
Because now there's going to be even further question marks in terms of how this all operates. But another piece of this, too, that should be mentioned is they have not found out how to fit Quickly in with this team yet because he's been completely hurt. He has not been able to play. And now you're going into next season with a point guard that has not been able to establish himself with this team, a star in Scotty Barnes who's still trying to find his way as a primary guy, while adding potentially Brandon Ingram to this mix, someone who, again, is 9 years in the league and has pretty well proven to this point that he is a ball-dominant mid-range scorer. Okay? So, anyway, I'll move on.
The major thing I take umbrage with is that, like, oh, he's a Band-Aid. Like, he is, but, like, not really. Like, in this landscape, he played 64 games last year. Pretty good. Compared to Emmanuel Quickley, or honestly, OG Anunoby, who, shockingly, hurt again for the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, like, aren't you not happy if Brandon Ingram averages 64 games a season for the Raptors over the duration of a 4-year, $160 million deal?
No.
That sounds good.
No, I don't want to see a guy play 64% of games, 64 games a season.
That's good, man.
He's played, again, under 70% of these games over the course of his career.
Yeah, but so does everybody.
Okay. If that's the argument, then great. If the argument is nobody plays, and again, like OG's played 49 this season.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, and he's done.
Yeah, he's done.
Do you think he plays 64?
This year?
Yeah, because it's like a significant foot thing, isn't it, that he's dealing with now again?
I don't know if he's going to end up hitting 64, but I'll tell you this is like, I don't like the idea that it's okay because he gets hurt, but a lot of other guys get hurt too. I'm not trying to compare my guys to Joel Embiid here. Mm-hmm. I think you want the players to play basketball, and you certainly want them to play basketball as you're trying to figure out what they all are together, and you combine the recent injury history of this team with what they've got going on moving forward.
At least we know Brandon Ingram, when he's healthy, is good and can play the minutes and play the role of like a good player, like on a relatively good team. Emmanuel Quickley, is that like, what do you know for sure about Emmanuel Quickley as your starting point guard?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know anything.
Nothing.
I don't know anything.
Nothing. You really don't know anything.